Hello, and welcome to this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds podcast, brought to you by Advanced Services and Fuse Networks. My name is Galen.
I'm Joe.
We're coming at you from the Creative Block Studios in Seattle, Washington. So, Joe, for our new listeners and viewers tuning in, listening to the first time, how did our podcast come to be?
Sure. So it first started out as a Facebook group page, and the purpose was to bring just businesses together to kind of communicate with one another, share tips, ask questions, and just try to help build each other up. Because we're a marketing company, we get asked lots of questions outside of marketing. So we thought, what a better way than to bring on different guest speakers to talk about different topics relevant to being in business.
Awesome. Thank you. Today's guest, we have Mr. Fred Carey on. Joe, you want to get started on the formal intro for our guest, please?
Fred is an internationally known entrepreneur and business thought leader with over 3 decades of leadership, experience, and transformational strategies that have resulted in billions of dollars in corporate value. His success stories cross boundaries. He has built high-growth businesses in finance, software, mobile technologies, data, retail, consumer projects, strategic services, and e-commerce. With his entrepreneurial spirit, Fred has started many businesses in different industries, created many successes, and acquired thousands of lessons along the way.
His desire to give back to a community of like-minded eccentrics led him to create IdeaPros, the world's first super venture partner, a company that could roll up its experienced sleeves and provide every entrepreneur with the opportunity to see their vision become a real company with a real product. He also produces a weekly show for entrepreneurs that has been viewed by over 4 million people. Everyone welcome Fred to today's podcast.
Thanks, Fred, for joining us.
I'm happy to be here, and my sleeves are rolled up.
There we go. We're ready to get to work and everything. So before we go on, we like to get to know our guests a little bit more. So we ask 3 questions. So our first question is, what are some early lessons learned as an entrepreneur?
That's a really good question, and I think the easiest one for any of us as entrepreneurs is that don't believe everything you hear. Basically, when I was going out raising capital or trying to put together strategic relationships, as soon as I got a slight nod, I was ready to pop the champagne and know that this was going to be successful. It was going to change my life. More than half the time, the investors that indicated that they were likely to write me a check disappeared, and the strategic partnerships that I was putting together most of the time didn't happen. So I would caution a beginning investor, a beginning entrepreneur, to just be cautious with what you have in front of you, and understand that it's a long road from an initial kind of yes to actually having some sort of relationship that makes a difference.
So you've been in business for over 3 decades, and over those 3 decades, what's been the best piece of advice that you've been given?
The best piece of advice that I was given was actually given to me by a lawyer, and I had a brief stint as a lawyer between my 10 companies that I started, and that was accidental, but that deserves its own show. But he gave me the best piece of advice, because this guy would just kill it. He had this way of doing depositions and talking to people and getting these experts in this little corner. So at the end, in his southern drawl, he would go, "Well, so doctor, then one of these 2 things is true." And either one of those 2 things was going to completely screw over the witness. And he would get people in the corner, and I tried to do it his way forever, and I could just never be successful. And so the best piece of advice I got was from him. And he said, do it your way. Don't look at others and see how they make their plans, see how they're successful. Look at them, but don't emulate them. Learn from them, but don't copy them. You find your own true way of speaking. We're all different. We all have a different way of communicating. Stick to the best way for you that you are most comfortable with, and you'll be very successful. That worked for me, and it's going to work for you too.
That's awesome. It's a great message for a lot of our entrepreneurs, our audience out there. Last question, since this technically is a marketing podcast, why is marketing important?
It's funny that we even have to ask that question, but we do. In fact, companies, when they're stretched thin and when revenues aren't doing what they should be doing, the first thing they want to do is cut the marketing budget. But the marketing is you. Marketing is you. As a your persona is delivered through your marketing messaging, your ads, your materials, offline materials, the things that establish you as a brand. All those things are. It's the only thing people can look at and understand who you are, and that's the only way, by the way, that they can find you. So if you think of marketing like a telescope, and you're this bright, brand new star out in the universe, if you don't have any marketing, you don't have a telescope. And that means nobody's going to find you, just like nobody's going to find that beautiful new star out in the universe. Marketing is your lifeblood. Your organization without marketing is going to be a tiny little organization and never get any bigger. And marketing is what fuels your growth.
Awesome. A good transition into our next segment, our hashtag Valor Cares initiative. Joe, that telescope of a star that's the small business in the galaxy, a good way to find that is having a website online. Talk to us about our hashtag Valor Cares initiative.
Yeah, so simply put, it's just a way for us to give back to businesses. So if you own a business and maybe you're a startup company, maybe you've been in business for 10, 15 years, maybe your best friend's cousin's brother built your website who lives in the basement and you just don't have access to your website. If you need a website built for your company, go to our website, click on Valor Cares, and we give away free website builds.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Come to our part of our podcast, our A Advanced Services Pump You Up quote of the day. So I found this quote on Fred's press sheet. So if my kids are watching, don't use bad words. I'm just reading my script. But it's fuck average, be legendary. So out of all the quotes we've had, these 4 words are as direct as they are. Fred, talk to us about that quote and why it's so obvious and intentional at the same time.
Well, before I answer, I want to let you see that I have a friend that just asked me about creating a website. I'm going to send her over to you guys. So that's a beautiful thing.
Thank you.
I applaud you for that. By the way, fuck average, be legendary. I got a registered trademark on it now, shockingly. Or I should say, fucking.
I want a T-shirt when you have them. I want a T-shirt set our way. So
we'll get one. We all want to have extraordinary lives, but when you go to bed at the end of the day and you put your head down on a pillow, what extraordinary thing did you do today? And if you can't think of anything, you're not very likely to end up having an extraordinary life. Pick one thing, do one thing out of the norm, reach a little higher than you ever have before, try something you've been afraid to try. Take a risk with your business to go that extra mile, bring in more relationships than you thought you could handle. Just be extraordinary. So be legendary. And if you're going to be average, then you're never going to leave that area. So it is a very direct quote. And sometimes, depending on the audience, I can cringe a little when it happens. But at least I have an asterisk after the U, so that becomes somewhat of a gift to the PG-13 lovers.
awesome. Thank you.
Millions of cybercriminals are out there on a daily basis trying to steal your information. It's not a matter of if, it's when. Small businesses account for 58% of cyber attacks annually. So help your company fight cybercrime and mitigate risk by being proactive. Call Fuse Networks, your local Seattle IT experts at 206-701-6040 for a complimentary IT network and security assessment.
Our Fuse Networks Did You Know segment. So I put a couple of things together with our topic, how to get financing, how to pitch yourself later. But I wanted to share 2 stats and 2 myths with you, and Fred, get your quick thought. So this first one, according to the SBA, there are 33,185,550 small businesses in the U.S., employing 61.7 million Americans. So the small business engine that we have in this country is still going. Do you see that in the future post-COVID getting stronger, regressing? What is your quick thought on that immense number?
550,000 new entrepreneurs every month in America alone. It's almost double our birth rate. And we have about 300,000 babies, 550,000 crying, screaming entrepreneurs. So the small business is the backbone of America. And while we see the billions and trillions that come through this big multinational global industries, the fact of the matter is that small business still accounts for the the bread and butter, employs more people than the large companies, and generates more revenue overall than the global companies do. Is a part of the total revenue of uh, this country and around the world, surely. So that stat actually even seemed a little low to me, to tell you the truth. But you have this exodus from corporate America, and when you exit, you don't exit into a big company. You exit into a small entrepreneurial enterprise. A
Hmm.
fraction of those can grow into big organizations, but the majority of them, if you do it right, can become really successful businesses.
This next stat: 77% of small businesses rely on personal savings for their initial funds. So every great company started on a dream, a belief. People finance their own dreams. Share your quick thought on that, please, Fred.
Yeah, that's another stat that I'd actually heard of 82% number on. But if you include maybe your immediate family, the reality is that most people start on a shoestring. And most people start with a very small amount of money. And then after that's done, they'll reach into their 401k plan, which, by the way, you can borrow from. If you have the right plan, you can borrow up to half the amount of money in it with a very modest amount of interest that you pay back to yourself. Uh, without any penalties. And people get second mortgages on their home. So like me, when I was 25, my second business I was starting, I had saved up for this 36-foot sailboat for 3 years, and I sold it after 5 weeks because I had a new business idea. And so you dig into your pocket. In fact, with IdeaPros, one of the foundational elements of us wanting to work with an entrepreneur is basically, do they have skin in the game? Are they putting in their own capital? Because once you do that, now you're taking that plunge. Now you're fucking average being legendary. You're going outside your comfort zone, and you're going all in with what you're doing. That means you're going to stick with it longer. And by sticking with it longer, you have a better chance of succeeding.
Obtaining business financing takes a long time and requires a lot of paperwork. Can you debunk that myth, please? Or did I say a myth incorrectly? Tell me, set me straight.
Well, there are many different ways of funding, and some of them do involve a lot of paperwork. And in fact, the SBA, which is probably giving us some of these figures, that there is pretty heavy level of paperwork involved. But there are a whole bunch of opportunities. Like if you're trying to do a friends and family round, a lot of our entrepreneurs that we've started businesses with them as their co-founder, we've trained them how to go out and raise capital from friends and family. And I had my most outrageous case was somebody who wanted to come work with us and didn't have the $100,000 needed to do their part of starting their own business. It was two brothers in Canada, and they didn't have any money. And I took them aside and I spent a month with them and showed them how to go pitch to friends and family. Um, they called us up 2 weeks later. They pitched to 20 people and got money from 18. And they got
Wow.
$150,000 in 2 weeks just by saying, "This is our idea. This is what we want to do with it. Will you invest in us?" So it can be really, really easy. That's an extreme example. But any of the friends and family rounds that you want to try to do to try to get people into your business and help support you can be done with very minimal amount of paperwork, a good pitch deck, and a great story and an understanding that you have. So there are vehicles that you can go out and raise capital without really going through a whole lot of paperwork. There's a lot of ways to do that.
And that's quite a stat. 18 out of 20, 90% success rate. That's pretty amazing. And you touched it a little bit, but this myth: banks are the only option for business financing. So you just demonstrated or gave us an example of you don't have to go to a bank to find financing. Are there other ways too, or other resources online people could look? to get more
Yeah,
information on?
in fact, often banks are the worst choice because they're pretty rigid in what they will give you money against. If you have a brand new business, you don't have the historical financial information that they love to see to be able to give you money. So it's a pretty rigid format, and it's very unlikely that you're going to get it unless you have an outrageous credit score and tons of assets and they're lending to you against those assets. Then it becomes a no-brainer for a bank. But if you're more modest in those regards, then banks are very hard to get them by. One of the things that it does involve paperwork, but there are several agencies that will do the paperwork for you. One of the things that's pretty incredible are grants. And if you have an ability to get a grant, if you have a business that is anyway focused on any of the 500 different elements that government grants look for, you can get a grant of up to $500,000 or more. And what's a beautiful thing about a grant, you don't have to pay it back, and there's no debt, no equity. They don't get a piece of anything. They're giving you a grant to do something for the better good. So you should definitely look into that. That it's surprising how many people can get it when they think they can't. Like, it could be even just employing the right types of people could enable you to get a grant. So that's the cheapest way because you don't have to pay anything. And again, friends and family is really a good way to do it. If you have a business that has an exit potential, in other words, if you're not building just a lifestyle business that you're going to be in for the rest of your life, but instead you're building a business that you want to grow to a certain level, and 3 to 5 years from now, you want to have an exit, either going public or being acquired by another company. As long as you have some exit, then you can go to different angel groups and things like that. You can also go to incubators and accelerators. Again, that really helps if you're a technology play. But in
Right.
those, like companies like Y Combinator, if you get picked to go into Y Combinator, you go there for 3 months. They give you $500,000 and they give you a boatload of connections that can get you funded for tens of millions or even more. Companies like Airbnb, Uber, the list goes on. DoorDash, many of them came through Y Combinator. Started out tiny.
Awesome. So let's get legendary now. Let's really talk to our audience how to get capital and how to pitch your business. So um, I understand the tech play and like pitching your business, getting capital from like an everyday entrepreneur or just a regular person, everyday person, everyman. It's like watching I think a Shark Tank, going to the sharks, pitching your idea. You have so much time. They drill you. You have to know your numbers. You have to know your product in and out. How many sales have you done? For the everyday entrepreneur looking to get money, infuse capital, white collar to blue collar businesses, what do you say to those people? I'll ask it two ways. Are there one or two things you see businesses always do wrong when they ask for capital? And then secondly, maybe you choose to answer how you want it. What are one or two things they are best practices to get started on the right path?
Um, and I love this question because so many people do this wrong. And even speaking of Y Combinator, right? Hugely successful. You go down there and you can download the kind of sketch of what a pitch deck should look like. And no offense to Y Combinator, it's wrong. And the reason it is one of the things that we repeatedly do as entrepreneurs. And whether we're raising capital or not, this is what we do that's fatal to us as entrepreneurs. We end up creating something, number one failure point for all new companies. We end up creating something that there's no demand for. Let that sink in. That's even greater than not having enough capital. We built something that nobody wants. Now, how crazy is that? If I asked you to be a coach for my sports team and I couldn't tell you what sport it was, what the rules were, what the opposition was like, how strong they were, what their weak points are, what's the purpose of the game, how long does it last, how do we get the audience on our side? If we couldn't answer any of those things for a sporting event, we'd be screwed. But that's how we go into business. And so the very first thing you need to think about when raising money or even not raising money is understand what you're doing. Because if you're going to ask somebody else for capital, they're an investor. Here's what they care about. This is the stock certificate. And this is what I'm going to get for giving money to you. They don't care about your dream. They don't care that you want to revolutionize the world. They want to know, I'm going to get this piece of financial paper. Why am I paying what I'm paying for it? When am I going to get my money back? How much am I going to get back? And how are you the person that's going to give that back to me? So whenever you fashion your pitches, don't fashion them around um, we're changing the world, we're revolutionizing everything. It scares the shit out of an investor. I mean, but have you ever changed the world before? Or like, are you Napoleon? No, I've never done any of those things, but I want to change the world now. That's really, really hard to do. From an investor, tone it down. You know, look, we're evolving, right? We're an evolution, not a revolution. We have 3 other companies in our space that have proven this model up, and they've gotten really big in a short period of time. However, there's one thing that they don't do, and all their customers are clamoring about because they don't do it, and that's the only thing we do. So we know we have a market, we have healthy competition, it's fast-growing marketplace, and we found the secret sauce that everybody's been asking for that nobody's been delivering. And that's why we feel comfortable that we're going to make this penetration in the marketplace. So you know where you fit in the world, know how to deal with those big competitors, be able to position yourself in a very lucrative space that an investor can feel comfortable with. And as you indicated, know your numbers. Every single slide in the pitch deck should have a number to it. Could be a financial number. You know, from our 3-year pro forma projections, in year 2, we say we're going to get to this level. Well, we're going to do it by getting this many members, these many customers. This is our acquisition strategy, get those customers. Or it could be 75 million Americans are employed by small businesses, right? One of those data points should be in every slide because you're talking to an investor. So the things that we do wrong over and over again is talk about how we're so amazing, how this is revolutionary, but we're changing the world. Look how shiny our buttons are. And they don't care about any of that stuff. Think like an investor. Why am I going to give you money? And if you can think that way and do your deck in that fashion that focuses on the money side of things and how you're going to get an exit for that investor, because investors don't want to invest in your lifestyle, they want a return. How are you going to get them capital? Then you have a much better chance.
So when I think legendary, there's I want to throw you with a quote and then get your and I'm trying to make Gary V. I thought there's a quote that sticks with me all the time when you're talking about something just came into my mind. Skills are cheap, passion is priceless. So the investors care about, I want to get the money on return. But I've been to like events where they have like pitch competitions and people give feedback and it's like the founder's passion story. Is that just like a false narrative or is that like real? If you're an investor, you're coming in the lens of an investor. So our audience wants to hear what investors think when they ask for money. But scraping that all aside, like, is that real? Like your authenticity as like, I have an idea and maybe it is to change the world, but you change the world making money at the same time. Talk to me about that.
I know Gary actually, and he probably meant a lot more than that. It is real, but it's the final element of real. All right, think about it this way. Here's what a pitch deck should really look like. The first part of a pitch deck should be winter is coming. From Game of Thrones, like they talked about that for 2 seasons. Nobody knew what the hell it meant. It meant there's a big shift taking place, right? For an investor to be really interested, there's a big disparity between the demand and the supply. And if you can show that, I mean, some of the most incredible investors in the world invest on fractions of a penny disparity in things. If you can show this huge disparity between supply and demand, you immediately have their attention. So think about winter is coming. The digital world has arrived. COVID has happened. People are traveling nomads. People do this. People work from their home. Businesses are scattered. Whatever it is that you're building upon, show that there's this huge discrepancy from the way the world was to the way the world is. And because of that, now you get into the problem. Because of that, the problem is that there's all this demand for all these new services, these new way of doing business, but the supply is very small. All right. And then our solution is, well, we got this amazing supply. It's fucking great. And we do all these things. Here's our business model. Here's where we're going to grow. And here's how we're going to get to the end. Now that investor cares at that point about your authenticity, your passion, your story. That's the last element. They don't, and I was one of the biggest idiots in that regard myself, because I have so much history and so many success stories that my second slide would be, and this is me, and this is everything I've done. And I realized over time, and I don't care, because I don't know that if I like what you're going to be doing now, right? It doesn't matter if you're successful if it's something I don't believe in. Right. So if they don't believe in your winter is coming statement that the world is shifting and there's this big discrepancy in supply and demand, you button up your laptop and get the hell out at that point, because they don't care how cool you are, how authentic you are, or anything like that. So when you get to the end, that's going to make the difference, because at the end, they're going to write a check to you, and they're not going to write a check to you if you're not authentic, if you're opportunistic, if you waffle. When the investor says, well, yeah, I would do that. If you had these other two things that you don't have, I'd really consider investing in you. Tell them to blow smoke, and you know where. That you have to be in control. If you're in control, then people are going to respect you. They're not only going to think you're authentic, but they're going to realize that you know what you're talking about. Look, I worked on this model for a year, and these are the 4 things we're going live with. I can't add these 2 things. I haven't studied them. I intimately know every aspect of what I want to do with this business. I know the capital that I need to have to pull it off, and I'm giving you an opportunity to invest in this. And you're going to get a 20x return, a 40x return if I could do my job right. So yes, you need to believe in me. Do you? At the end.
So let me jump into the capital portion then. So what are like 2 or 3 ways that businesses can raise capital for their businesses?
Well, again, it's depending on the type of business it is. If you have a business that is looking for an exit strategy, then you have a lot more things you can utilize. If you're looking for a lifestyle business, that something that you're going to grow and keep forever, then you have a different set of investors, and you're going to have to give them different things, like a piece of your profits, things like that they're going to be passively comfortable with over time. But regardless of where you're going to go to raise capital, you need to look synergistically at who it is you're approaching. If it's a private equity firm, which is a really good place to get capital, are they in that space? Do they have other investments in that space? Same thing with angel groups. There's certain angel groups that really focus on technology plays, and that's it. Don't waste your time dealing with those. So the place to go for investment is the places that you've researched and found are synergistic to what it is you're trying to do. They're comfortable in that space. They've made investments in that space. They've done well in that space. That opens the door for you to go in there and make a difference and leave with a check.
So let me ask you this then. What is IdeaPros all about?
Um, this is hopefully my last company. And I started it about 4 years ago, and I spent the first year putting the model together correctly. I wanted to kind of, let me back up. They say you spend the first half of your career building up your resume and the second half building up your legacy. And I'm on that part of it. And so the best way to do that is to give back to as many people as possible and change the lives of as many people as possible. And there's no better place to do that than in entrepreneurship, because entrepreneurship is like leaving the corporate world and trying to become a brain surgeon overnight. You don't have the training. You don't understand the pitfalls. When you run into your first corner, you're going to quit and go back to the man, as they say. And you go on social media, and it complicates it even more, because you got a 20-year-old with a Lamborghini saying, give me $500, I'll make you a millionaire overnight, and it's all BS. And the reality is, when I was a kid and you thought about the rich people, you were thinking about the doctors, the lawyers, the business owner down the street, the athletes, the movie stars. But now, when you think about the rich people, it's all about the entrepreneurs. So everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. Everybody wants to leave that cushion nest of the salary, which is your heroin, that keeps you there with, and they don't realize what they're getting into. And it's hard And the fact is, despite what you see on social media, if you look at the statistics, 94% of the multimillionaires and billionaires in entrepreneurship all went to really prestigious schools. 60% of them got advanced degrees from those schools. They're insiders. They know the game. They have the connections. They know how to get money. They know how to talk money. And those are the ones that still have a 90% failure rate, because that's the venture capital model. But those are the ones that get all the money, all the expertise, all the connections, and the 95% of the rest of us are outsiders. And so I created IdeaPros to turn us outsiders into insiders using my experience, my connections, my access to capital. And so, in the last 2 years, we had over 100,000 applications to work with us. And it's not cheap to work with us on the full partnership level. It's a minimum of $100,000 and 30% equity in the company we're going to form together.
Right.
But people are at the raw idea stage, and they're going to spend $500,000 to $1 million otherwise and do the wrong thing and be one of those failure points of creating something that nobody wants, that there's no demand for. So it's been hugely successful, but it's been like drinking out of a fire hose too.
So I got one last question. Back to the reference, the Game of Thrones, winter is coming. So, the White Walkers are here. So that space, is there a space or an industry that is like the next thing you're looking to invest in? Like winter is now here, right, so to speak. What is that space field? Fintech, finance, what does that space look like for our audience, just to kind of share their insight from an investor side?
There's certain times when we run into what's called a black swan moment. And we just had one, right? So the reality is a black swan moment is something that nobody expects, nobody was looking for, and all of a sudden, shit, it's here. And AI and Chat GPT and all of that, right? In September of last year, nobody knew what the hell it was. And now everybody's afraid of what the heck that's going to mean for our future. And so everybody wants to be AI, just like everybody wanted to be .com. And everybody wanted to be a REIT and real estate when things were taking off. So what I do from the investor side of things, and what I encourage people to do if they're building for this kind of momentum and the shift in global industries, is I look for infrastructure plays rather than an individual company that does a certain thing. So what type of companies will enable this shift? Who are going to be the carriers? Who's the racetrack to the horse race, right? So if you're betting on the racetrack's going to win every time. If you're betting on the jockey, you're betting on the horse, you got a 1 in 10 chance of winning, and even worse when you're talking about groundbreaking technology. So I'm looking at things like NVIDIA, which helps generate kind of a new world things, and even companies that are like Microsoft has got a new life now because of all the money that they put into Chat GPT, and now they've built out this infrastructure. Now they're kind of almost becoming cool again, which is shocking after all these years. So if you're just don't ride the tail of new technologies and try to put AI at the end of your name. Find out, if you want to go deeper and find out what's making those technologies work and build something around that. That's what the best investors invest in.
That is a lot of great stuff that we packed into a condensed amount of time. Yeah, we would love to continue another conversation and have you on back. It's very intriguing. We haven't had this perspective on our podcast yet. But before we close, one last plug for our hashtag Valor Cares initiative, Joe.
Yep. So if you own a business and you need a website, just go to our Ask Valor Mastermind podcast.com, click on Valor Cares, and submit your information.
Awesome. Well, on behalf of our sponsors, Advanced Services and Fuse Networks, Fred, thanks for joining us. This is very entertaining. The step to being legendary, that's going to stick with me for a while. But I'm Galen.
I'm Joe.
Coming at you from the Creative Block Studios in Seattle, Washington. Thanks for watching and listening to this episode of the Ask Valor Masterminds podcast. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Fred.